Elise, 39, has been married to 42-year-old Ethan for more than 15 years. Mostly we have had a quite strong marriage, except for one large hurdle that struck us hard a few years back: infertility. There have been no significant problems or wild arguments. Both Ethan and I had great desire for kids. Doctors, therapies, you name it. We tried everything, but nothing helped. Adoption was a choice we gave great thought. However, where we live, the procedure is rather difficult. Though it may seem simpler, helping a youngster in need is difficult. Besides, Ethan and I work full-time. Therefore, it seemed improper to bring a child into our lives without adequate time to commit to them. We did not want to be those parents that adopt and thereafter cannot be totally present for their child. We thus placed that concept on wait-on. About that time, we considered perhaps we might assist someone in our family instead if we were unable to have children of our own. That is when we considered Mandy, Ethan's sister. Mandy, a single mother of 3, Emma, 23, Ryan, 20, and Jared, 17, is 44. Paul, her ex-husband, was a real deadbeat, an alcoholic who hardly paid child support, left Mandy to fend for herself. She was working 2 jobs to keep things afloat, but she was obviously struggling, especially with regard to her kids' schooling. Her level of stress was clear-cut, and it seemed unfair. As the individuals we are, Ethan and I chose to volunteer with the children's education. Mandy was really appreciative, and initially her children behaved respectfully. Emma excelled since she was already a college student. She graduated, secured a fantastic career, and developed personally. Emma regularly thanked us for the help, even though she most likely could have handled on her own. Knowing we were helping, though, felt nice. From what we observed, Ryan and Jared were doing rather well while still in high school. Everything appeared to be proceeding without incident. Mandy was under a bit less stress, the kids were excelling, and we were assisting. Everyone seemed to gain something from it. Then things started to change, though. Ryan graduated high school, and we began to see some changes in his attitude. Like we did with Emma, we asked him what his college intentions were once he graduated. But Ryan delivered something surprising instead of being grateful or even enthusiastic. "I have no desire to attend college. Just give me the money instead," replied he frankly. Ethan and I looked at each other perplexed. College money was not simply sitting there to be consumed, though. "What do you need the money for?" Ethan asked him. Ryan said nonchalantly, "I want to start a business." He articulated it as we ought to have known all along. Although starting a business is not a terrible concept, Ryan lacked a strategy, not even the most basic notion of the type of company he intended to operate. He said, "I'll figure it out." He lacked any business knowledge or a plan, nothing that would persuade us to turn over thousands of dollars. Though we discussed it, Ethan and I were not convinced by the concept. Ryan began following up over the next 2 weeks, text messaging Ethan about the money nonstop as like we owed him anything. He now had a very different mentality. He behaved entitled, like we were expected to pay for his nebulous company endeavor. Ethan and I agreed after numerous talks that we were unable to give him the money. Supporting something without obvious direction made no sense. Ryan flounced when we told him the news. Rather than face us head-on, though, he went to Rita, the mother of Mandy and Ethan, complaining that we were not helping him. Ryan presented it as though we had promised him the money, and then had second thoughts. Not true. Soon on our case were Mandy and Rita, reminding us we were backing out on our pledge to assist with the children's schooling, and Ryan's aspirations required assistance. Ethan set his foot down and told both of them that if Ryan decided to return to school, we would gladly pay his college tuition. But we were not providing money for a half-baked business proposal. We resisted their attempts to guilt-trip us. Things ultimately settled down following many bouts of back and forth. And so we reasoned. Ryan's business never materialized at all in the end. It hardly surprised us when he never even passed the talking stage. Ryan returned, however, stating he was ready to head to college and inquired whether we would be able to pay for his tuition, just as we felt we were moving on from that. We agreed and began to pay for his college bills, just like idiots do. Yet something had changed. Ryan had different views about us. He appeared not even nice or appreciative anymore. He would hardly talk to us during family get-togethers. When he did, he answered succinctly and with shortcuts. No thank you. No appreciation of the assistance we were providing him. Just a chilly, far-off attitude that made us question whether our assistance at all was error-free. We dismissed it for a while, maybe believing he had simply matured in a more subdued manner. But then things became quite embarrassing. It began to feel as though particularly Ryan and Jared, Mandy's children, didn't value anything we had done for them. The entitlement was clearly showing itself more and more. Then arrived Jared's 17th birthday supper held at Mandy's residence. Given how things had been with Ryan, Ethan and I were reluctant to go, but Ethan reasoned that it would be wise to try to maintain family harmony. We so decided to go, despite my negative emotions about it. When we got to Mandy's house, everything first appeared normal. Though I couldn't get rid of the strange atmosphere Ryan and Jared were generating, our dinner conversation was light and casual. Jared particularly appeared far off and apathetic in everything, yet he was strangely fixated on me, which bothered me. I attempted to ignore it, concentrating instead on celebrating Jared's birthday. Then, out of nowhere, Jared turned directly at me and spoke what I will never forget. How can Ethan even find you attractive? You are unattractive and somewhat elderly. I halted. I attempted to sort out what he had just said, but my head went blank. At his own birthday meal, was this 17-year-old truly disparaging me like that? Usually composed and cool, Ethan suddenly got out of his chair. What the devil did you just say? His voice was harsh as he commanded. The whole table turned quiet. The way the rest of the family responded, though, was the worst part. Mandy, Ryan, even Rita, they were giggling. They laughed at it. Nobody seemed to care that I was seated there, very embarrassed, not knowing what I had done to merit this. Ethan asked Jared to apologize, but Jared only shrugged and replied, "It was a joke." I could no more bear it. Expecting Mandy to jump in and scold her kid, I glanced to her and she shrugged and said, "Come on, it's his birthday. Not destroy it for something so little. He is still a young lad." That summed up it. Ethan reached for my hand and we headed out. I finished it. And this was merely the start of everything sliding downhill. Ethan and I were both upset over the horrible birthday meal. Though the journey home was silent, I could sense the strain emanating from both of us, not only from what Jared had said, but also from the way everyone else at the table had responded, like it was nothing, like I was the cause of disturbance. I still felt shocked. After everything we had accomplished for Mandy and her children, it was a smack in the face. How could they be so contemptuous? We hardly discussed it after we got home. We needed time to calm off and sort through what had transpired. The whole thing seemed strange, like we had passed some invisible barrier where we knew we would never be really loved or respected no matter how hard we tried to assist. Mandy and Rita came up to our place without warning the next week. Not surprisingly, Mandy has always been one to avoid conflict, but when she needed something, she swoops in with an apology. And sure enough, the focus of this visit was just that. They hardly bothered with small conversation at all, saying how sorry they were about what occurred at Jared's birthday dinner. Mandy started straight in. She claimed to have spoken with him and that he was depressed about the whole situation. I had never heard a more practiced, disingenuous apology before. Furthermore, you know what? Jared absent from them as well. Should he be genuinely remorseful? Why was he absent to personally atone? Point blank, I questioned them. Mandy stammered for a reply before finally saying, "He's too embarrassed to face you." I bought it for a second, but not really. Jared felt no humiliation. He was indifferent. Deep down, though, I knew Mandy and Rita were there solely because they needed something from us. They only wanted to make things right, so they would ask for more money. They were not really sorry. And sure enough, Mandy at last arrived at the true reason they were there after a few more embarrassing apologies. Thus, like you did with Ryan and Emma, Jared's getting ready to graduate and we were hoping you could help with his college expenses. I just fixed my eyes on her. She had the arrogance to stand there and ask us for more money after everything that had happened. After Jared's rudeness, Ryan's entitlement, and the absence of any true apology. It appeared as though they could have just not cared or even lacked awareness of what they were requesting. They thought we would assist out again, without asking questions, since they were so accustomed to our doing so. Ethan, who had been off to the side, arms crossed, and at last spoke out. Until Jared apologizes, we are not paying for anything. And not via you. He must come here and tell Elise what she faces. Ask not for anything till that comes about. Mandy and Rita stunned each other. They obviously had not anticipated us to be so steadfast, saying that Jared shouldn't be penalized for what he said, that he's just a kid, and that he didn't mean it. Mandy instantly sought to backtrack. Ethan and I, though, were not purchasing it. Jared was not 7, but 17. He understood exactly what he was doing, and his lack of personal apologies said volumes. Ethan lay everything out for them. We have done a lot for your children and you, but respect has two directions. We are not going to keep lavishing money upon those who value nothing, and unless Jared develops some respect, we are most certainly not paying for his education. Saying that Jared didn't deserve to miss out on college because of one little mistake, Mandy sought to argue. The fact is, though, this was not a one-time error. It was a component of a longer years-building trend of entitlement and contempt, and I was not about to let them dismiss it as though it were no importance. Ever the mediator, Rita sought to intervene and said, "You cannot let one episode destroy the family. After all, we are family and ought to be able to forgive and go on. But it proved to be the issue. For years, they had been explaining their actions with the "we're family" justification. They expected us to keep giving without ever asking any responsibility in return, to forgive and forget. We were also bored with it. Not about the money. I turned to Mandy and stated, "It comes from respect. Jared embarrassed me in front of everyone, and instead of apologizing, you are standing here protecting him. He must understand that his behavior has results if he wants our assistance. Of course, Mandy began to wither. Her go-to action whenever she ran against opposition was declaring she was struggling and needed our support. She sought to portray the victim. She even ventured to argue that by punishing the entire family for Jared's actions, we were being unjust. I was not having it, though. Punishable? Are you insane? Jared hardly qualifies as an adult. You let him go with his perfect knowledge of what he was doing. This is about him learning that you cannot treat people like trash and expect them to keep assisting you, not about us being cruel. At that time, Ethan spoke out. We're finished. You are on your own until Jared apologizes. Sincerely. Mandy and Rita kept fighting, attempting whatever strategy they could come up with to convince us to alter our minds. But we stayed strong. We were not going to be coerced into handing them cash. Over years, we had done enough for them. All we had gotten in return was entitlement and disdain. They departed gradually. Mandy was still in tears and Rita seemed enraged. Ethan and I felt relief. It seemed as though a weight had been taken off our backsides. At last, we set our foot down and made it plain that we would not be taken advantage of going forward. Ethan and I sat in quiet for some time following their departure, simply contemplating all that had transpired. Like we had at last marked a line in the sand, it seemed like a turning moment. We were done stooping backwards to assist those who lacked appreciation. Things were going to change right then. Really, I was good with it. We had been striving for too long to make everyone else happy, to be the good family members constantly on hand to support. But none of that counted if we were not treated with respect. Mandy, Jared, Ryan, they value nothing we have done for them. Like we owed them, they simply expected it. But that day we made it quite evident that respect is acquired rather than given, and we wouldn't be helping those who didn't show us any. At last, standing up for ourselves felt right, to prioritize our own well-being over continual concern about others. I felt as though we once more had power over our life, first in a long time. Naturally, though, that was not the end of it. A few months later, Ryan emailed us. Not a call or visit, just an email. And what did this email contain? It was essentially a demand for our payment of Jared's college tuition. Like we were some sort of ATM, no apologies or acknowledgement of what had happened. Just a cold, business-like email including a link to the tuition payment website. The arrogance truly amazed me. Following all that had transpired after their treatment of us, they truly felt they could just contact us and we would turn up the money. Not an apology, no justification, nothing. Ethan and I paid no attention to responding either. We just let it lie in our email, disregarded. The least they could do if they sought something from us was try to approach us like people. They didn't, though. They simply expected us to behave as we always have. 2 weeks later, Ethan answered a call from Rita inquiring why we hadn't paid Jared's tuition yet. She acted as though perhaps we had overlooked or missed the email. Ethan was not feeling any of it. "Mom," he declared, "we're done. We are shutting them off. They are on their own if they cannot respect us." Rita tried to counter by stating we were being petty and Jared didn't mean what he said. She even tried to suggest that at the meal I had misinterpreted Jared's remark. But Ethan closed it. "Enough, Mom. We're finished. Money gone, aid gone as well. They have to understand that behavior has results. And so it was. At least that is what we believed. Naturally, Karen wasn't going to let it go so effortlessly. Ethan's phone was exploding with texts from her within minutes, full of false apologies and begging us to rethink. Realizing we were serious about cutting them off, she was obviously in panic mode. Nevertheless, we did not reply. Guilt trips and false apologies piqued little interest among us. We had decided and we were following that choice. Unannounced, Karen and Rita returned to our place the following day. They arrived here expecting us to quit everything and deal with them. They did not even consider phoning beforehand. "But this time we were not going to be pushed around," Ethan responded. "We're not doing this," before Karen could even begin her sob tale when he answered the door. "People that treat us disrespectfully into our house are not welcomed inside our house long ago. You ought to have repented not just for needing money today, but also for something else." Karen attempted a plea, but Ethan was not buying it. We were not going to continue tolerating their entitled conduct. He made quite plain. That was the instant I realized we were really finished. We were depriving them emotionally as much as we were financially. And that seemed like the correct choice. Ethan had only told Karen and Rita that we were done a few days ago, and as feared, they did not take it well. It seemed unthinkable to them that we were really serious this time, since they were so used to us rushing in to help whenever things got bad. Perhaps stupidly, I reasoned that they would pick up the message and leave us alone following Ethan's last words. Obviously, though, that is not what happened. We had just used to the notion of cutting them off when Karen got more aggressive. She came up at Ethan's company unexpectedly instead of honoring our choice. Though Ethan told me everything about it later, I was not there. The receptionist told him Karen had been waiting to meet with him for more than an hour in the lobby. He was in a meeting. Of course, she had not contacted or texted beforehand. She had simply shown up as she felt she could wear him down personally. Ethan hardly bothered descending to see her. He advised the receptionist to inform Karen he was busy and unable to talk to her. Karen departed when she at last understood she would not be able to get anywhere with him, but not without creating an event. She had been weeping in the lobby, Ethan informed me, telling the receptionist her brother was leaving her and her children in their hour of need. Said another way, it was humiliating. That evening when Ethan arrived home, I could tell how much the whole experience had worn on him. Not just because of what Karen had done, but also because she was obviously guilt-trip him with her tears and desperation meant to control him. Ethan did not cave, though, and I was glad of him for being firm. Though we both knew it was essential, it was difficult to turn away relatives. This was about refusing to let ourselves be exploited rather than about aiding someone in need. The following few weeks were essentially calm. I reasoned Karen had at last understood she wouldn't be able to get anywhere by being the victim. Suddenly, though, I got a note from Emma, Karen's eldest daughter. Emma always had been the conscientious one. She was the one who never bothered us, worked hard, and had her act together. Emma was the only one of Karen's children who had ever truly expressed thanks for the support we had provided her. She sent a brief but sincere message. She said she was sorry for how her family had treated us, particularly with regard to Jared and Ryan's behavior. She claimed to have had her own problems with her family lately, and that she well understood why Ethan and I had opted to sever connections. Emma showed no demand for anything. She aimed not to guilt-trip us. She only wanted us to know she was sorry for the way things had ended out and backed our choice. Her remarks really moved me. It let me realize that not every member of their family perished. Emma had grown up in the same surroundings as her brothers, yet nevertheless she had come out different, kind, polite, and appreciative. Her message was like a breath of pure air among all the anarchy. I briefly felt as though perhaps some of our work had not been in vain. Ethan and I answered her, thanks her for her nice comments, and let her know we valued her getting in touch. Though little, such gesture meant a great deal to us. It reminded me that we had, in some tiny measure, changed things. At least we had enabled Emma to become the person she was. Even if we had missed Ryan and Jared. Naturally, though, the tranquility did not endure very long. Another storm was building when we were beginning to feel as though we could move on from all the turmoil. This time it arrived as a family event from which we were helpless. The whole extended family was celebrating as Ethan's grandfather turned 75. I would have hated the thought of spending a day surrounded by Karen, Ryan, Jared, and the rest of them under regular events. But given the conflict with the rest of the family, Ethan's grandfather had always been friendly to us. We didn't want to miss his big day. We so made the decision to go, expecting to at least avoid any direct encounter. At first, everything appeared good when we arrived. People were catching up, mixing and laughing. Ethan's grandfather was in excellent mood, and the day seemed to go rather perfectly. For much of the afternoon, Ethan and I avoided Karen and her children, which was already a victory in my book. Naturally, though, it did not endure. I ought to have known better. I noted it during the toasts. Everyone was gathered around listening to Ethan's dad speak sincerely about family and the value of grandfather to all of us. I noticed Jared and Ryan standing off to the side, observing me at that point. They were simply gazing at me with these arrogant, knowing expressions on their faces. They were not even attempting to be subdued about it. At first, I disregarded them, maybe seeing myself as merely paranoid. But as the speech progressed, I observed them murmuring to one another and grinning as though they were in on some joke nobody else knew about. Though I tried to dismiss it, my gut sensed they were up to something. After all, it was Grandpa's day, and I wanted not to create a scene. But their behavior started to irritate me. Every time I turned to look at them, they were looking at me, murmuring, then laughing like a couple of schoolyard's bullies. Though I could not prove it, I felt they were ridiculing me. To be honest, I wanted no scene in front of Ethan's whole family. But I could not handle it any longer as the evening drew on. I had bitten my tongue to maintain the peace, too long allowing things to drift. This time I wasn't about to let them off. With it following the toast, I went directly over to Ryan and Jared, still speaking and grinning. Their looks altered the moment they spotted me arriving. They obviously had no expectation of me facing them. "What's so funny?" Asks crossed my arms and pointed them down, asking. Looking at one another, they tried to seem innocent. Ryan answered, "Nothing," using that phony, wide-eyed face he often employed when he was startled. "We were not talking about you." Jared agreed, "Yeah, we were just joking around." But I could see the lie all on his face. I wasn't finding purchase in it. "You believe me to be dumb? All night you have been looking at me, giggling and murmuring. Say it to my face if you have anything to say. For a moment they just stood there, frozen. Then Ryan said under his breath, "What a slut." Loud enough for me to hear, but low enough to pass for a slip in an act of absolute bravado. That summed it up. The blood shot to my face. Not going to let Ryan get away with it this time, I moved closer, exactly in his face. "What did you just say?" Ryan became white. He stammered something about it being a joke, but I wasn't letting him off easy. "You find it humorous to discuss individuals like that? This is how you honor us following everything we have done for your family." And laughing behind my back and calling me names? Jared was decent by now, looking embarrassed and murmuring a half-hearted apology. Ryan, though, merely stood there, arms crossed, rebellious, as like he didn't give a damn. Similar to his belief, he was untouchable. I persisted, not backing down. "You find it humorous to treat me disrespectfully? Just because you think you could get away with it, you treat them like garbage? You have still another item arriving. Ethan had to have seen what was happening at that instant, as he was right by my side. Fury in his eyes, he turned to gaze at Jared and Ryan. "What's going on?" With a low and menacing voice, Ethan questioned. I filled him in fast, and Ethan turned to Ryan and Jared. "I'm sorry, now, or both of you are finished. From us again, you will never get anything." Jared muttered a meager apology, but Ryan just stood there, arms crossed like he was defying us to cut him off. Ethan needed only that to see. Turning on his heels, he grabbed my hand and we left Jared and Ryan standing there looking astonished. What everybody else in the room thought mattered not to me. I stopped trying to be polite. To put it mildly. The remainder of the day was uncomfortable. For the rest of the evening, Karen looked at me strangely. She obviously knew something had gone wrong, but was too scared to approach me squarely. Rita avoided us entirely, which was good by me. For Ethan's grandpa's benefit, we stayed until the conclusion of the party, but it was obvious that our relationship with the rest of the family had changed permanently. Though we hardly spoke on the way home, Ethan and I both understood what had just transpired. Jared, Ryan, and Karen had passed the line we had marked on the beach. We were finished with them right then. Apologies and second chances would vanish from the scene. They had showed us just who they were, and we would not waste any more time or effort on those who did not value us. That evening, when we arrived home, I had an unusual relief. At last, we had stood up for ourselves and defined a limit we would be following. It was liberating to make it very evident that we would no longer put up with their disrespect. Deep down, though, I knew this was not the end. Those who, like Karen, Ryan, and Jared, did not give up that readily. When they needed anything, they always managed to slink back into your life, and I sensed they weren't done asking us for what they wanted. After that catastrophe at the family gathering, I believed perhaps, just maybe, we were at last done. Ethan and I had established our positions really precisely. Karen, Ryan, Jared, or anybody else's contempt or entitlement was intolerable to us anymore. Drawing that last line in the sand felt like a great weight taken off our shoulders. People that enjoy them, of course, do not give up that readily. The texts began flooding back only a few days later. Still, this time it was not only Karen. Trying to persuade us that family is family, and that we should let it go, Rita also jumped in as the mediator she always considered to be essential. My phone rang with texts from both of them when I was at home. Like they always did, I understood precisely what they were attempting to do: play the guilt card and drive us into doing what they wanted. Long, too theatrical pleadings about how terrible things had been for Karen, about how Ryan and Jared had learnt their lesson, and about how we should move past this for the sake of the family abound throughout her letter. Rita, in her customary manner, reflected their feelings and emphasized the need of not allowing one event to damage years of relationships. Still, I was not buying any of it. I seldom bothered reading their texts through all the way. Neither Ethan nor anybody else either. We got done. After years of kneeling backwards to assist Karen and her children, what had we gained? Entitled only, disrespectful, and manipulative only. They were quite naive to believe we would be giving in following all that. We disregarded their texts as we knew finally they would get the message and quit guilt-trip us. Still, that marked only the beginning of it. A few days later, Karen decided to raise the ante. She texted and called this time. Not only. Unannounced, she returned to Ethan's company, stayed in the lobby for hours waiting for him. By now, Ethan used his office for this. Ethan hardly flounced when the receptionist told him Karen was arrived. He only advised her to let Karen know he was preoccupied and unable to visit her. Karen missed the cue. She spent practically 2 hours there before leaving, and when she did, she texted Ethan another series of frantic messages begging him to simply chat to her. She also included some dramatic lines on how she didn't know how she and the lads would make it without our support, that Jared was suffering and needed us to come over for him. To be honest, it was depressing. Where were Jared and Ryan if they were so apologetic for their treatment of us? Why were the ones seeking forgiveness, apologizing, and reaching out not among us? The fact was they had little interest. Since they believed they had done nothing illegal, they did not want to apologize. They still thought we owed them anything. Things quieted for a little when Ethan turned off Karen's texts. We reasoned perhaps they had at last realized we were not going to go. However, about 1 week later I received a note from Emma. Emma had always been the one shining ray in this entire catastrophe now. The only person in Karen's family who had ever truly respected and thanked us for all we had done for her. Emma was doing fantastic and had moved away for business. We admired her as she had her own life far detached from the poisonous drama of her family. Her message differed from that of Karen or Rita. It was very up and honest. She said she knew why we would have severed relations with her family and that she did not hold us responsible for it. She also acknowledged that she has lately struggled with Ryan and Jared and that she was not shocked that things had turned out the way they did. Emma neither asked for anything nor tried guilt trip us. She wanted just to let us know she was on our side and hoped we were doing. Her words really got to me. It served as a reminder that, in that household, at least one individual had benefited from our efforts, notwithstanding all else. Emma was working hard, polite, and appreciative of the chances we had given her. She had turned out nicely, and really, that was plenty for me. Thanking Emma for her kind comments. I answered her, and that we valued her getting in touch. In the middle of all the tumult, there was a little but significant moment of calm. I thought for the first time in weeks, perhaps we were not the evil guys in this context. Perhaps all along we had done the right thing. Cutting off the folks who mistreated us was the finest choice we could have made. Of course, Karen and Rita were not going to let things finish there. They made one last-ditch bid to re-enter our good graces. Friday night. Ethan and I were at home savoring a peaceful night in. We figured Karen or Rita had finally backed off since we hadn't heard from them in many days. But we received a knock at the door just as we were relaxing into the evening. Neither Ethan nor I expected anyone, hence we looked at each other before walking to the door. Indeed, there were Karen and Rita standing on our porch sporting the most subdued "we're sorry" expressions. They hardly gave phoning ahead much thought. As usual, they arrived up expecting us to drop everything and handle them. Opening the door, my heart dropped, knowing precisely where this was going. Karen lost no time starting her well-rehearsed speech on how sorry she was, how much she and the boys had learnt from the circumstance, and how they only needed one more chance to set things right. Like she always did when she needed anything, she even began to weep. At this point, everything was so expected that I lost even a sense of resentment. I was simply fatigued. Ethan kept her from getting very far. "We're not doing this," he declared with great conviction. "You had many of opportunity to right things, but you didn't. People who insult us into our house are not welcome in our house. Hence, we are not going to help someone who does not value what we have done for them." Still in tears, Karen begged him to pay attention. She said Jared and Ryan were really sorry and they couldn't afford to lose our support. But Ethan was not purchasing it. "If they're so sad," he questioned, "why aren't they here with you right now? Why have they not come to atone personally?" Frozen, startled by the inquiry, Karen. Though Ethan and I both knew the truth, she blurted out some flimsy justification about how embarrassed the lads were of facing us. Not humiliated. Jared and Ryan were entitled. They believed they had done nothing wrong, hence they felt they had no need of an apology. We still thought we owed them. Rita, always the peacekeeper, tried to clear things out. "You know how kids are," she remarked, in that patronizing manner she often employed when she felt she was being smart. "They hardly consider the results of their activities. As adults, though, we should be better aware. One error should not define their future." I at last lost my tolerance at that point. I added, my voice stern, "This isn't about one mistake. This is about years of entitlement and disrespect following a pattern. Ryan and Jared are no more children. They almost are grown-ups, and they have to understand that behavior has results. They have to start acting like adults if they wish to be treated like adults." Rita persisted in trying to argue, but I stopped her. "What we have gotten in exchange for what you and your children have given us over the years is contempt and entitlement. We are not going to keep providing you endlessly while you take and show no thanks. You have allowed Jared and Ryan grow up believing they could treat others whatever they choose and yet receive what they demand. The world does not operate in that manner. Trying to play the victim, Karen began weeping once more. But neither Ethan nor I could find resonance in it. Everything we have heard before. And this time we were not caving. Ethan stated, his voice final. We're done. Ask us nothing else. Not here. You have to go through this on your own. And he opened the door to indicate it was time for them to go. Though Karen sobbed all the way to the vehicle, neither of us felt bad. They had wasted every one of the countless opportunities we had given them. Enough, more than enough. I got closure not felt previously as soon as the door closed behind them. We had tried for years to make everyone else happy, to be the kind family members constantly on hand to assist, but none of that counted if we were not treated with respect. Karen, Jared, Ryan, they had profited from us for far too long. It was over now as well. Ethan and I were spared from their turmoil for once in years. We had stayed solid and drawn the line. Though difficult, it was very vital. It felt awful, but at last we had put ourselves first. Karen and Rita tried to get in touch a few more times in the next weeks, but we did not answer. We got done. Wow, very well done. And to be honest, that was the finest choice we have ever taken. Eventually, it had nothing to do with the money. It centered on respect. We also refused to assist anyone who failed to show us any. When I go back over everything, I have not one regretful thought. Every chance we presented to them to right things, they turned down. That comes from them. I and Ethan, we are at last at ease.